Hello, and welcome to the Psych Leadership Podcast, the podcast where we discuss the intersection between psychology, leadership, and what it means to your small business. As always, I'm Luke Upchurch, and so happy that you took the time out of your day to hang out with me and to learn a little something that might help you and the folks that you lead every day. A quick callback to last week's episode, by the way, if you didn't catch it, we talked a little bit about the winter blues and how to understand depression and the signs of depression, or SAD as it's referred to. Check that out if you haven't had a chance. I don't know about you, but I've been a little cooped up with all this snow, so definitely something to take a listen to. In any case, moving forward to this week, we're going to be talking about change management, specifically in dealing with diverse teams and some strategies for getting everybody bought into the changes that you're trying to deliver. And to help support that, we have special guest Kasey Lightle on the line with us. Kasey, would you like to introduce yourself for today?
Yeah, sure thing, Luke. And first off, so excited to be here. A little bit about me. So I have spent my career helping organizations figure out how to create better experiences for their people. Have worked across different industries, focusing on culture, on leadership, and, at the end of the day, navigating change. All about understanding what makes people tick and finding ways to help them and their organizations thrive through whatever it is that is coming their way.
Oh, that's awesome. I want to zero in on something you said there on what makes people tick. That's a big part of change management in general.
It sure is.
Yeah, understanding where people are and the idea that as I'm communicating change out, I have to model it based on what each individual needs to hear.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Luke. Everyone is different, right? And we are dealing with individuals, and human beings are inherently complex. And at the end of the day, change affects people. It's, it truly is as simple as that.
Yeah. So with that, why don't we get into a couple quick discussion points here? So first off, from your perspective, Kasey, why do people resist change?
Yeah, so first of all, resistance, it's human nature, right? When something new comes along, the first question that most people ask is, how is this going to affect me? It's very instinctive. And I think we have to acknowledge that before we do anything else. And there's also this sense of control, or really the loss of it. Change often feels like it's something that's happening to us and not with us. And when people feel powerless, and we've all been there, you know what I'm talking about, we've felt that before, it's just inherent, we push back, right? And then there's fear. There's fear of the unknown, there's fear of failure, fear of losing what's comfortable. Even if someone isn't thrilled with the way things are, at least it's familiar. And change really disrupts that.
Right. So from a psychological perspective, there's a couple points there that you hit on, whether you knew that there was backing behind this or not, and given your educational prowess, I assume that was already inherent for you. But for our listeners out there, one of the psychological principles is loss aversion. So humans are actually hardwired to fear loss more than they value the potential gain. So we hold tight to what we know, and the unknown is inherently scary, and so we shy away from that. So the idea of involving the person in the change is really powerful. If you ever seen the movie, there was an old Leonardo DiCaprio movie called Inception, and that the whole concept is that they try to help a person to come to a conclusion by actually implanting the idea deep in their mind.
Yes.
And it's kind of like that in a way.
Yeah. And you had me at Leonardo DiCaprio, Luke, but yes, I am following.
Absolutely. Now there's, another aspect, again, from that psychological perspective, is the uncertainty and stress. So a lot of folks, the uncertainty aspect of it can lead to cognitive overload. It can actually drive up our anxiety. So just the idea of something different today than it was yesterday, right? It brings up those feelings in us, and it almost puts up your blinders. It gets you to the point that you're so focused on the why is this happening? Why is this different? And to your point, maybe we're not a part of the thought process that got us to the change. That you don't allow yourself to hear the silver lining. You don't allow yourself to hear the positive aspects of it because you're so dead set focused on who moved my cheese, right?
Exactly. And Luke, I think about it, to your point from a psychological perspective, we're really talking about survival instincts. Our brains are wired to keep us safe, and safe means predictable. And when something disrupts that predictability, the brain's like, whoa, hold on, is this a threat? And Here's the thing, when people resist change, it doesn't mean they're being difficult, right? It means they're just processing, trying to make sense of what's happening and then how they fit in.
Right. And to kind of add on to that, when you talk about their just processing, we have to be aware as leaders that everybody is going to process that in a little bit different way. That's why typically when you introduce change, it's a good idea to introduce it in different mediums and over multiple conversations. So it isn't just let me go to a town hall, right? We see that a lot in corporations. Let me go to a town hall and tell you this giant thing that's going to disrupt your world. It's laying down the breadcrumbs, helping folks understand, helping them be a part of it. Some of that comes into play too with the social dynamics of it. So in psychology, you've heard of the term groupthink, I assume, right?
Yeah, sure thing.
So within groupthink, essentially the 3 is your magic number. If you get 3 people that agree with your thing, whatever the change is, whatever the pivot is going to be, if 3 people agree to it, usually the group will follow. If 3 people oppose, well, now you've got anarchy. So there's a little bit of follow the leader. Meaning, if as a leader, if I'm getting into this, and we'll talk a little bit more about some theories for this as we move forward in the conversation. But one of the things that I always recommend is working with your. Every organization has a group of leaders that folks look up to, that are your change management team, if you will. And so, if you can get the buy-in there, if you can build that, then the social cultural dynamic becomes a lot easier.
And you're
absolutely resonate with you?
It does. And Luke, gosh, I'm sorry for the ding.
That's all right.
It does resonate with me, and I know we'll get into some of the specific processes in a moment. But I think about that group dynamic to change, and when you change something in a team or within an organization, you're not just changing processes, right? We're changing relationships. And people wonder, well, how is this going to affect the way we work together, right? So it's not only about, getting those 3 people, as you say, on board, and we know the other 3, if we have folks that are not into the change, that it could derail things. But ultimately, I think people are just asking themselves, how is this going to affect the way we work together? What does this mean for our culture? For example, let's say a team is used to operating in silos and you introduce a more collaborative approach. It's not just a new way of working, it's a challenge to how they've defined success. And that feels really personal, right? Even if the change is objectively better.
Hey, sorry to interrupt the show. I just wanted to ask you a quick favor. If you are enjoying this content, consider a follow, a review, or if you're on YouTube, a like and subscribe. You can even comment directly and let me know what topics you might like me to discuss in the future. You can also reach out to me via any of the social media platforms. I'd love to engage further to understand how I can help your business. All right, enough of that. Back to the show. Right. I mean, it's a primary example that comes to mind for me, and I'm sure a lot of the folks listening today can relate to this. COVID completely changed the dynamic of the workplace, right? You and I used to work for the same company, and I remember the concept of work from home was almost like a dirty word, right? I remember asking one of my managers, I asked one of my managers when I first started working with this company, said, popped into his office. I've been there a couple months. I said, hey, I heard work at home is a thing. And I'd come from retail where, there's work from home as a website. That's not how things are managed in retail. So I was intrigued by this concept. I said, hey, I heard work at home's a thing. What do you think? And he goes, well, that's where good careers go to die. You don't want to do that. That's you will be forgotten. Out of sight, out of mind kind of concept. And then you fast forward to a post-COVID world, and we still have some leaders, some organizations that are incredibly resistant to the idea of your workforce being spread out. I mean, my team right now in my day job, they're all over the world. I've got them spread out all over the United States and a couple of them in other countries as well. But it creates so much adaptability. You still have some folks that are resistant to that. Like I get folks, for instance, that always say, well, cameras are required. Have to turn on cameras. Well, there's two schools of thought. Maybe I'm managing, and because I'm managing people, not leading, there's a distinct difference. Because I'm managing people, maybe that as a micromanager, I want to know that you're actually here working kind of thing, that you're not working two jobs, because that's in the IT field, that's kind of a thing. People will work multiple remote jobs. But then the other side of that is maybe they're coming at it from a servant leadership. I want to see your reactions. I want to know that what I'm saying is connecting in terms of change management. I want to see how you are feeling about this, read your emotions a little bit so that I can address those concerns in real time, right? But people are still coming to grips with that. And I mean, you see Elon Musk saying everybody's coming into the office or you're fired. I think something to that effect, right?
Yeah, it's a little wild.
Yeah. But then, I mean, other companies are leaning into it. But you still have that shift of old school, this is the way we've always done it. And new age, I mean, at this point, I've worked at home for this October will make 12 years.
Oh,
so
wow.
At this point, for me I was working at home before it was cool. But at this point, I think that would be probably question number two, right? Is it the type of job that I want, and can I work from home? That's before I'd even consider something.
It is for many people, and it's interesting, Luke. So I worked from home for 6 years as well. And I know when you and I worked together, we lived in different cities, right? So very much a virtual organization where, occasionally everyone would get together for an offsite, something like that. And I think that we'll continue to see that tide turn, as a lot of organizations do want their team members back in the office. But from a change management perspective, I think what we're experiencing now is that resistance, right? And so at the end of the day, I think we need to look at the different industries, and what works for one will not work for all. So for example, Luke, I'm in healthcare right now. Most of our workforce simply cannot work from home, right? They're caring for patients. They're taking care of people. And some functions can. In our previous world, it would not be a big deal for someone to work from home. To your point, and it's funny, I reflect back, Luke, on, the ask to turn on the cameras. And as I'm sitting there in my pajamas, candidly, I'm going to tell the truth now, sitting there in my pajamas, sometimes business from the waist up, right? We've been there as well.
Right. That's called the mullet, by the way. That's the mullet.
Nice.
That's the business up top, casual down low.
Yeah, I love it. We've been there.
Right.
But as you get that dreaded ask, right, turn on your cameras, it's you do question. You do question, well, is the reason that someone may be trying to build a relationship with me? They want to see my facial expressions. They want me to see them. Or is it, well, they want to see what I'm doing? And so truly with that scenario, Luke, obviously there's some change management involved in the whole work from home movement. And I say movement, it's moving back and forth, right? But, as I look at that, I would just urge people to assume positive intent, truly. There are different reasons why people would ask that. I don't know that I would pull that into the change management process.
Yeah, and see, for me, I think it's I think it depends on if that is a standalone action item or if it's part of a greater push. And so I'll give you an example. I'm working with a team right now that we have a mix of full-time employees and contractors, and again, we're scattered all over the place geographically. And so turning on the cameras for me, the reason I would pull into change management is if I take that as a piece to the puzzle of the overall, I'm trying to shift the way that this team works. Right? This is an IT-based team. A lot of IT-based teams since ever have been on a waterfall methodology. It's a step action. For those of you unfamiliar, waterfall is if I'm doing, I'll use the analogy of building a house. Okay, if you're having a house built, you wouldn't just tell the builder, "This is what I want. Here's the money, and I'll see you in 6 months." But that's kind of what waterfall is. You go over the requirements, and then the team starts building the thing, whatever the thing is, app, software, etc. And then when they're done, you come back and they pull the sheet off and unveil what they have designed. And then you back and forth about, well, that's not what I asked for. Well, we have to start over. We have to redesign the contract. We have to charge you again. Right? That's waterfall. And that's what a lot of IT teams were built on. That's in their blood. And now we're moving to this agile methodology. This every day we get together and we talk about, what'd you do yesterday? What are you doing today? What are your big wins? What are your big barriers? Those kind of things. And it's a different way of working. So because we're changing so much there, turning on the cameras can be a function of that. It can be a function of, we are all learning this together, and to help understand how you are learning the big thing, facial expressions, body language, those kinds of communications is a necessary component of it. So yeah, to your point, just turning on the cameras by itself, maybe not. Maybe that doesn't fall into change management, but as a function of a larger ask, it could be.
I agree with you, Luke. You make a really good point there. So I think switching from video in a work from home setup, at face value, and to my point, I'm like, it kind of sounds like a small change, but that could feel really huge for a team. And when you're working remotely, video changes the dynamic. It makes your interactions more personal, and it can add that layer of vulnerability as well. So suddenly people are on display in a way that they weren't with just audio or with emails. And so from a change management perspective, I think it's really important for us to think about the why. So why is that change happening? Building those better connections? Is it improving collaboration? And once the team understands the purpose, it's easier to get that buy-in, right? So what can leaders do in that scenario to get the buy-in? Well, you have to understand where people are coming from. What are they afraid of? What are they excited about? What do they need to do to feel safe moving forward?
Exactly. And so that kind of leads us into our next topic here. I wanted to get into the steps that a leader can take to gain buy-in with their team. And you hit on it so perfectly there in terms of setting the vision. So to extend on the conversation that we were having about cameras, one of the ways that leaders can do this, and I'm hitting this point hard because it has been a topic that folks have asked me about, that our audience has been interested in. How do you build the work at home culture has been the general consensus. And so one thing that I have tried to do is I talk with the team about communications. There's actually an exercise that I've done with teams, and you can do this in person as well, but it adds a whole different element when it's online. So I really, really encourage it. when we rely more on text-based communications, email, chat, those kind of things, when we rely on that, emotion is stripped from it. And sometimes, communication, you talked before about understanding how people need to hear a given message. Communications is no different, right? Some people are going to look at this podcast and they're going to think, man, 20, 30 minutes, however long we go, that's too long. I'm going to read the transcript, right? And some of them won't even read the transcript. Some of them will pop that transcript into an AI and say, give me the summary. Some people want the bullet points. Some people want the novel, okay? But going back to that team dynamic, if I can talk with my team and set up this communication exercise, it helps to understand how your team needs to communicate. Do they need the novel? Do they need the bullet points? So what I would suggest for you, and I'll put a brief description of this in the notes for the podcast, by the way, if anybody's interested in replicating. But what I've done in the past is I'll take my larger team, however many you have, divide it up into 2 or 3, and you basically do a little bit of role playing. And this can be done on Zoom. You have breakout rooms, okay? So you divide them up in your breakout rooms, 2 to 3 equal parts. You're going to pop into each breakout room and give some instructions. The idea is that you tell everybody to have a large sheet of paper, and you don't define large, mind you. If they ask questions about, well, how big is large, you decide. So you'll get folks that, no joke, large is going to be a Post-it note or an index card. Some people bust out poster board. There's a method to the madness here. So you tell them, get a large piece of paper and get some stuff to draw, some utensils to draw with. And again, no clarification on that. Pens, pencils, crayons, glitter, whatever. Just tell them to get some supplies and have it handy at their desk. You're going to pop into each call, to each breakout room, and tell them that you want a house built. And you are going to describe just your ideal house. Don't burn too many brain cells on this. I thought through, my spouse and I have had many conversations about what our dream house would be, and so I just kind of describe it. And I purposely describe different points with each team. So one team, I'm very specific on the exterior. I don't talk a lot about the interior. I give them high-level stuff. The next team, I focus on interior. The third team, kind of a mix, okay? And I would challenge you, write down some bullet points so you kind of know exactly what you're going to say with each team. Afterwards, you get everybody together, cameras are on, and each team gets a chance to present. Even though they've all drawn the picture, they talk amongst themselves and kind of decide who had the best picture based on the description that you gave. And they're going to show that on the camera. They're going to hold up their page and show, this is what I heard you say. It's obviously not going to be perfect. And that's the whole point, is that through that dynamic conversation, you start to realize that some folks need every little detail, because you'll have folks that say, well, you didn't tell me that you wanted you said wraparound porch, for example. You said wraparound porch. You didn't tell me that you wanted it deep enough to have a full patio set on. You just said wraparound porch, right? There's a distinct difference between the two. You said that you wanted a garden. You didn't say that you wanted to grow more than just flowers, that you wanted to actually grow, vegetables and things like that. So my point is that through that virtual dynamic, you get to really understand what your team needs in terms of communication. That tends to lead us down the path of what is the best communication. And then your team will decide on their own, going back to that movie Inception, they will decide on their own. They will call out. And I've done this over and over again, and I'm telling you it works. They will call out the idea that communication, that a big part of it is being able to see your face. Because I forgot to mention this before, you're going to ask them to be on camera, but you're not going to turn on yours. Okay? And again, that's by point. Make up an excuse, I don't feel good, whatever, but don't turn on your camera. They're going to point it out. They're going to say, well, if I would have seen your facial expressions, I would have known. I could have seen your hand gestures to know you wanted the porch this big and not that big, and things along those lines. In any case, eventually they get to the point where they say, well, if you would have turned on your camera, I would have known these things. I would have had that extra component because you were expressing emotions or giving hand gestures, et cetera, and that was a blind spot for me. And now next thing you know, it's their idea to turn on the cameras. And they saw the value in it because they saw the lack in communication. They will actually get frustrated with this, knowing, even though they know that this doesn't have anything to do with their day job, people are naturally competitive. So they will get frustrated, especially when you come in and you look at their drawing and you say, well, that wasn't what I asked for.
Wow. So that exercise, Luke, I think it's fantastic and it really resonates with me. And, I think about it from a change management perspective, and, it's not about processes. At the end of the day, it's about emotions. And if we skip that emotional part, we hit a wall every single time. And I think your exercise shows how important video can be in communication. Facial expressions, those nonverbal cues, it adds more depth to those conversations and can help gauge reactions, can help people connect. So it's, it comes back to that human element. How is it that we collaborate and understand each other, even if we're virtual? And video can play a big role in that.
Absolutely. So what about you, Kasey? Do you have any specific tools that you typically ask leaders to use to gain that buy-in?
I do. So I think it's really important, Luke, that leaders first set the vision, right? So people need to know where they're going and why it matters. A clear vision really answers that question of why we are doing this. And at the end of the day, adults need to know the why, right? I think back to, Simon Sinek and the start with why. Why are we doing this? And the key here is not to make it about the process, not about the change itself. It's about the outcome. Mm-hmm. So, for example, if you're rolling out a new initiative, don't just say, this is going to make us more efficient. Say, this is about making your work easier, and let's free up some of your time for what really matters. You have to connect it to something that people actually care about. And then, Luke, I think building trust is really important as well. Trust is everything. And if people don't trust you, they're not going to trust the change. And trust comes from transparency. You have to be really honest about what you know, what you don't know, and what you're going to do to figure it out. And you cannot forget to listen. The listening is key. And I know this sounds so simple, Luke. I'm a big fan of making it easy. And sometimes it is that easy, right? Sometimes people just need to vent or express their concerns. And that doesn't mean they're against the change. It means they want to feel heard. And adaptability is a skill. And like any skill, it's going to take some practice. So you have to encourage your team to see the change as an opportunity and not a threat. And if you're listening to this podcast, and you know me, you have probably heard me say this before, change creates the most opportunity. A lot of people will shy away from change because it feels uncomfortable, but it is during times of great change when the biggest opportunities present themselves. So you have to celebrate those small wins along the way and show your people that it's okay to stumble as long as we keep moving forward. And so there are some specific tools and processes that I use as well. Luke, I'm a big fan of Kotter's 8-step change process. Again, because it makes it easy, right? It gives us a roadmap. And I think whenever and wherever we can make it easy, we have to do that. And so if you can start with creating urgency and help people see why the change is needed now, and then build your coalition of supporters that can help you carry that vision forward, ultimately you're going to be more successful. And so the biggest takeaway for me from Kotter's model is that change isn't a one-time event, right? It's not a point in time and we've arrived. It's a journey, and you have to keep reinforcing the vision at every step. Again, people need to understand the why. Where are we going? What's the North Star? And emotional intelligence. So Luke, I do facilitate a few sessions now on emotional intelligence. And so I truly think that's key as well. Change is emotional. Remember what I said, if we take the emotion out, we fall flat. It stirs up fear. It stirs up excitement. Change can stir up doubt. It can also make people feel hopeful, and really all at the same time. So leaders who can actually recognize those emotions and navigate through those emotions, both in themselves and in their teams, those are the leaders that succeed in the change management space. One of the best things that you can do as a leader is to ask, and you're asking yourself this, Luke, how would I feel if I were in their shoes? And that empathy can go a long way in building trust and reducing resistance.
Oh, excellent points. And for anybody not familiar with Kotter's 8-step process for leading change, I'm going to list that out in the description so that you have that. I'd encourage you. We could talk all day about it, but go out and read some of Kotter's books on this. He's got one called A Sense of Urgency that covers a lot of this content. So I'd encourage you to go out and read that, take a look at that, but I will list those out for you as well. Something, too, that I have found helpful, Kasey, and having worked with you in the past, I'm sure you would be a proponent of this as well. I always try to get to know the individuals on the team. And sometimes that isn't possible when you have these giant teams, right? But if you can at least get a feel for, you talked about understanding how does it affect them? How would I feel if I were in their shoes? It's a lot easier to know how you'd feel in their shoes if you know them individually. So, for example, when I sit down and have my one-on-ones with my team, the one-on-one is their time. And I just, I get on the call and we don't talk business. We just, hey, how's the family? What are your plans this weekend? When I reached out to one of my team members this morning, first thing I said is hey, happy Friday. You got any good plans for the weekend? And yeah, that takes me a couple sentences away from getting down to business and asking him the thing that I actually wanted to talk about from a tactical perspective. But it also gives me insights into who that person is, what makes them tick, so that later on down the line when we work together through a change management type process, I can frame it up in a way that resonates with that individual.
Yeah, and Luke, it goes back to trust, right? So when you get to know people individually, it's everything when it comes to change management. Change impacts people differently. So why would it surprise us that we have to approach this from an individual perspective, right? The better we understand an individual's motivations, what they're afraid of, their communication style, the better we can support them through a change. Some people, and this reminds me of the exercise that you shared, Luke, some people need all the details, right? They need to know all the ins and outs and what color the house is and how many stories and all the things, but they need all of that to feel comfortable, while others just want to know the big picture. So when you take the time to connect with individuals, you're not just managing the change, right? Again, it goes back to trust. You're building that trust. And that's what gets people through uncertainty that comes with change.
Absolutely. I want to circle back real quick on the emotional intelligence piece. That's another piece that when it comes to change, being able to step back as a servant leader and having a better idea about that person's emotional intelligence and I don't know. I'm not a fan of that phrase, emotional intelligence. I don't know. It's maturity in general. It's business maturity. It's a lot of things rolled up. So emotional intelligence, it almost feels too vague for me. But in any case, I like to think through how can I meet this right where they live. Meaning, if I'm going to share this change with this person, how is this person going to react? What questions are they going to have? And how can I kind of bake the answer to those questions in my delivery, right? So if I already know that this person is very tactical and that they're trying to grow their career, for example, and that this change could derail that, how do I build that into my message to say, this shift in the company dynamic is going to enable XYZ that still allows for that career growth model and those kind of things, right? if I have some sort of idea as to where they are on that spectrum from an emotional intelligence perspective, then I can bake in their pushback. I can bake in the retort to that within what I share out. It doesn't necessarily stop them from voicing that opinion. It sort of shows that I know my audience enough to prepare for that, and hopefully to ease that to mitigate that a little bit. Does that resonate with you at all?
It does, Luke. And I think you hit the nail on the head. And emotional intelligence and servant leadership are all about individualization. You have to see people as they are and meet them where they need the support, especially during times of change. During change, you'll have people who will need reassurance. Others will need clarity, and some just want to feel heard. So when you focus on understanding each person, you're creating trust and you're making that change feel possible to them as an individual.
Absolutely. So, and with that, and this was, I'm going a little off of the outline here, Kasey. So I'm hoping I'm not throwing you too much of a curveball. But you and I had kicked around some conversation about this offline. The dynamic of cultural differences, as you think about the change management, it's important, leaders, to understand the various needs of your audience. So this is not just about an individual. This is understanding the cohorts within your organization, and how do you frame the message in such a way that's going to resonate with them. I'll give you an example. I was recently on a call that we had folks from all over the United States on this particular call, and the team that I work with, we're basically knocking on the door of this other team saying, hey, you need to take this action. You need to uninstall one software, install another software. So we're doing a little bit of a change out. And it's high priority, and it has a tight timeline, right? And so that immediately people kind of clinch up. What do you mean I have to stop what I'm doing and take on this new work, right? This is reprioritization, right? Immediately folks are, what are you doing to my world? And there were some comments that folks made that were indicative of the culture in their area that didn't necessarily sit well with everybody else. So, for example, there was an individual there that this person comes from the Green Bay area, Wisconsin area, and there's a term that they use often in that area to sort of summarize what you just said. So if they agree and acknowledge, I heard you, they might say, Luke, I hear what you're saying. We need to have better emotional intelligence, blah, blah, blah. And they actually use that phrase, blah, blah, blah. Okay? And that's...
I've heard it, Luke.
Yeah. And for that area, for that geographical region, that isn't a sign of disrespect. That is an acknowledgement of, I heard what you said. I'm not going to repeat what you said, but I acknowledge it. Now I'm going to build upon it. So it means nothing, an offense. However, a big basis of our team, of the team that I work with every day, is based out of Texas. And so we had some folks on the call that, if you know anything about Texas, it goes, the order of operations goes respect, 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 and then we go down. So that came off as incredibly disrespectful. And so then we had to do some damage control, because one guy makes this comment not meaning anything disrespectful. Another one takes it as a slap in the face. It's completely disrespectful. So again, in terms of change and change management as a leader, if you can go into that situation understanding I have different cohorts, different types of people that are going to need this message polished up and spun in a different way, and be aware of the potential landmines, that goes a long way. I work with a lot of folks in a lot of folks of Indian background, and the dynamics there between the hierarchy of leadership, for example, right? We're trying to build psychological safety with the team, but in some cultures, hierarchy trumps the individuality that the United States pushes in terms of speaking up. So if I understand that in change management, for example, if I come to a team that has that dynamic embedded in it and I say, what is your opinion about this change? I'm going to get some folks that may push back and some folks that will quietly disagree, but they're not going to say anything against me because I'm their leader. They're not going to speak up in that environment because I'm their leader. I have to understand that and know that if I really want their feedback, I'm going to have to meet them at a different venue. If I ask them that question in a space where hierarchy is a perception, I can't be surprised when that doesn't meet them where they are.
And that's right, Luke. So as a leader who may be leading a change, cultural competency really is key, especially if you are leading a wide-scale, broad-scale change in multiple locations, demographics, etc. But cultural competency, if you're not familiar with it and you're listening, it's simply understanding and respecting that people come from different backgrounds, have different beliefs, traditions, ways of communicating, and being open to those differences, learning from them, and then adapting how you interact so everyone feels valued, understood, seen. But cultural differences can play a huge role in change management. There are different norms around communication, to your point, decision-making and authority. How people view authority can vary widely. So in some cultures, it's expected that you would ask a lot of questions, that you would push back and challenge those ideas. And in others, it might be seen as disrespectful. And it's interesting when we think about cultural competency, cultural differences, we tend to kind of think internationally. But Luke, in your examples, it's very homegrown. It's here. But we are a very diverse nation. And so this is something, regardless of who you think you're interacting with, you truly do need to have this awareness and competency. So you need to know who's in your organization and frame the change in a way that resonates broadly. Be mindful of your language, acknowledge different perspectives, and create that space for everyone to engage, whether they're direct communicators or maybe they're more reserved. And at the same time, you need to identify those who may need more of an individual approach. We talked a lot about the importance of individualism, right? There may be some team members who feel culturally hesitant to speak up in group settings or who need extra context to align their perspective. And so when you take the time to navigate both the group and individual dynamic, especially in that cultural competency context, you're not just driving change, you're making it more inclusive and sustainable.
Absolutely. And so, Kasey, with that, there's actually two resources that I'm going to link in the description for the podcast here. One of them is a website that we use a lot in psychology. It actually compares different cultures. It has I believe it's 5 key metrics that they use, and you can select different countries, and it will stack rank those and show you what's important in country A versus how that same concept applies to country B or C, etc. This is a site that, and I don't have the name handy, but we use it in psychological research. So this isn't a flash in the pan, thing that you'd find on Facebook. This is actual legitimate research. So I'm going to throw that out there. Leaders, if you have a diverse team, I'll encourage you to go out there and use this. It'll give you another tool for your toolbox. The other one, there's several different versions of this, but there's a test that you can have your team take, a quick little personality test called Colors. And there are several versions of this. But to Kasey's point, it helps you understand a little bit more of the different cohorts that may exist in your organization so that you can meet folks where they are. All right. Well, folks, that is all the time we have for today. So, Kasey, thank you so much for hanging out with me and for being a thought leader in this. This was a great conversation today.
Of course, Luke. It was fun. Have me again.
All right. All right. Well, everybody, thanks again. We'll talk soon. Hey, you made it all the way to the end of the podcast. Thank you so much for spending a little bit of time with me. Again, if you like this content, don't hesitate to reach out. You can also connect with me on my various social media accounts. So reach out. Let's have a conversation. I look forward to working with you. Have a great day.